Oh, hello, and welcome to Muscle for Life. I'm your host, Mike Matthews. Thank you for joining me today. And if you haven't already, please do take a moment to subscribe to the show in whatever app you are listening to me in so you don't miss any new episodes. And it helps me because it boosts the rankings of the show. Now, this episode is an interview I did with Chanel Collette about her experience transitioning from a longtime physique competitor to embracing other reasons to train, other motivations, and particularly going from being very focused on body image to being less focused on body image, because there's nothing wrong with caring about how you look, and there's nothing wrong with that being a major part of the motivation to continue going to the gym. Anybody who trains regularly and who looks good, who says that they don't care at all about how they look and they only do it for the health benefits and the psychological benefits and so forth, and they're lying. And maybe they're even lying to themselves. Maybe they just don't want to admit that vanity is a major driving factor in the fitness game, and that's okay so long as you are aware of it and so long as you don't allow it to become your entire identity. So that is what today's interview is going to be about. And Chanel and I also talk about staying motivated to keep training once there are no major changes to see in your physique anymore. Once you have your forever physique, basically. And for most people, that is probably 5 to 7 years of consistent training. They're going to gain more or less all of the muscle that is genetically available to them in their first 5 to 7 years if they do the most important things mostly right most of the time, as I like to say. And then, of course, there's just body fat levels, and guys can comfortably hover probably around 10%, maybe a little bit leaner until they start to feel bad. And women can stay around 20% until they start to notice lowered energy levels and worse mood and period disruptions usually, and so on. And so for many people who reach that point, it can be demotivating to realize that there isn't much progress left to make on any front. So how do you stay motivated? How do you continue going into the gym and training hard and enjoying it? Because if you really don't enjoy it, it is going to be hard to stick to. So Chanel and I talk about that as well. And in case you are not familiar with her, she is a former physique and wellness competitor who competed in various bikini shows and won Miss Bikini Universe in 2014 and overall champion at Fitness Universe in 2016. And Chanel is also a strength and conditioning coach, currently serving as the CEO and head coach of Audacious Athletes. And her team, they have helped thousands of people, and women in particular. They specialize in helping women get fitter and stronger. And Chanel is one of the first sponsored athletes who ever signed on with my sports nutrition company, Legion, which is pretty cool. And I really appreciate her support over the years and her belief in Legion and our mission to not just create great supplements, but help people get into great shape and great health. Also, if you like what I'm doing here on the podcast and elsewhere, definitely check out my health and fitness books, including the #1 best-selling weightlifting books for men and women in the world, Bigger, Leaner, Stronger, and Thinner, Leaner, Stronger, as well as the leading flexible dieting cookbook, The Shredded Chef. Now, these books have sold well over 1 million copies and have helped thousands of people build their best body ever, and you can find them on all major online retailers like Audible, Amazon, iTunes, Kobo, and Google Play, as well as in select Barnes & Noble stores. And I should also mention that you can get any of the audiobooks 100% free when you sign up for an Audible account. And this is a great way to make those pockets of downtime like commuting, meal prepping, and cleaning more interesting, entertaining, and productive. And so if you want to take Audible up on this offer, and if you want to get one of my audiobooks for free. Just go to www.buylegion, that's B-U-Y, legion.com/audible, and sign up for your account. So again, if you appreciate my work and if you want to see more of it, and if you want to learn time-proven and evidence-based strategies for losing fat, building muscle, and getting healthy, and strategies that work for anyone and everyone, regardless of age or circumstances, please do consider picking up one of my best-selling books, Bigger, Leaner, Stronger for Men, Thinner, Leaner, Stronger for Women, and The Shredded Chef for my favorite fitness-friendly recipes. Hey, Chanel. Happy Friday, as people say.
Yeah, happy Friday to you too, Mike. Nice to be here. Nice to finish off my Friday afternoon work week with you.
Yeah, same. Thanks for taking the time to come on the podcast. So
I appreciate it. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I wanted to talk to you about is something that you have a lot of experience with in having worked with many people over the years, and particularly having worked with many women. And this is a discussion that I think will be very valuable to many women listening, but also to men. And that is, I guess, where we can start. And I'll let you start your discussion and your explanation wherever you want. Probably your background as a competitor will be relevant to this. But I wanted to open with your thoughts on training in a way that is very focused on how you look. And as a competitor, that is obviously the primary focus, at least with all the people I've talked with who, now strength competitors aside, but bodybuilders, physique competitors, they often will say, yeah, I don't care how strong I am. I don't care what I need to do in the gym per se. I just care about looking a certain way because that's the game. That's how you're judged. And so I understand that. And a lot of people getting into fitness, that is the primary motivation initially. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Is either they want to lose fat, or maybe they're starting out very small and they want to gain muscle. They want to look a certain way. But then eventually, and I can relate to this in my own training, you gain a fair amount of muscle, you gain a fair amount of strength, and you then realize that if you're going to remain a natural weightlifter, not much more is going to change. Like, I'm happy with my physique now, but this is it. This is what I've got. It doesn't like 10 more years of weightlifting is not going to make very much of a difference. That before and after image is not going to be very impressive. It's going to be, oh yeah, you looked pretty good. And I guess you still look pretty good. And that's it. That's what 10 years of training got you. And then this is something I've written and spoken about, in that if you want to still enjoy your training, still look forward to it, still maintain, it's not just maybe motivation, but find it fun, and actually want to keep going. I think you have to move away from the solely body image focused motivation to, you at least have to incorporate other motivations. And these are some of the things that I know, again, you have a lot of experience helping people make that transition. And so I think it's enough of my rambling preamble, and I'll just give the floor to you.
So I started physique competitions solely out of the point at which I was in an audience and I was like, I can do that. Really not having any clue how I would do that or that I even could, but it just immediately came to me that I could. As a former endurance athlete, I had just started to tap into progressive training, or quote, physique progressive training, meaning I was working with some other fellow bodybuilders and physique athletes. And it seemed like my physique was already starting to shift from, pain in my knee from my running. And I was like, wow, I can actually run now, intermittently and not have knee pain, but I'm also getting a lot stronger. I was just seeing so many positive benefits to strength training. And with strength training now being transitioned over to from a physique standpoint, I was like, wow, I can really do this. So for me, it didn't actually start I want to look a certain way. It was like, oh, I can just do this. So my initial impression with physique competing wasn't, I think, how normally people get into it. But it was more of like, I can do this kind of mentality. But then as I got further into it, that psyche of watching the scale go down, having the scale go down being a necessity for my, quote, improvement or my success rate was determined based on that scale going down. So over the years, I chased that so hard. And that's when, I dealt with hormonal issues because I constantly chased a lower number. And my physique, like you had mentioned, there was a point at which it just stopped progressing, honestly, because I was just chasing that one number. And so it's like I have this before and then I have this after, and nothing was really looking that much different. And it was so hard to maintain that after. I could not sustain it. And so then I had to kind of retrace my steps. I had to come back to the foundation of, overall training progression again, and understanding that the aspect of nutrition was going to be so important for me and spending enough ample time away from dieting. So, I had this time in about 2017 where I about lost my marbles when it came to physique competing. And I didn't really know if I actually was going to be able to go forward with it. So then I spent most of 2018 increasing my calories, doing the things I needed to do, gaining the appropriate amount of mass in areas. And I was still able to compete at bikini at that point. My physique was still within that division criteria. So I competed at the very end of 2018 in bikini. And then I knew I had learned from my mistakes, and I knew I needed to take a whole year off of training. And I, like you said, fell further in love with progressive training. I fell further in love with, wow, I can actually eat more in a very sustainable way. I can go out to eat and I can see scale stability. I know a lot of women struggle with dining out or social instances where they do one thing off their quote plan and they gain 5 pounds overnight, and it becomes such a mental game at that point. And so I had finally gotten to a point in 2019 where my body didn't face those fluctuations anymore. And so along with that came even more muscle tissue though. And so I pushed myself outside of the bikini division, not even realizing I did it. We got into my 2020 season. And if anybody, fellow competitors who are listening to this, who competed in 2020, my heart goes out to you. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was the hardest thing to plan. But in general, I just wasn't seeing the scale drop. And as a bikini competitor, I was so used to seeing that happen. So I had this like kind of freak out moment that I'm never going to do this again. But it was just my body was never going to look like the bikini criteria again. And my scale weight was not going to ever be that small again. So I had pushed myself into a division that I chose to compete in wellness. So that was the last point at which I stepped on stage, was as a wellness competitor. And I see where that division is going. And so like you had mentioned, it's like I had to decide if I wanted to push my physique to that criteria and fit in that box, or if I wanted to just sustain the physique that I had kind of earned myself in 2019 of like, okay, I can do all of these life things. I can go on a vacation. I can go in the gym and have fun. I can maybe not just only focus on my glutes all the time in my training. And I can actually like have a very well-rounded and balanced training program, because I couldn't have those well-rounded programs when I was literally vying tooth and nail to gain, an extra pound of muscle in one specific area of my body. And that's just so challenging to do. And it kind of takes away a little bit of that fire that you have for training when you're putting some, painstakingly efforts. And I had some hip issues to begin with too. And I think a lot of those hip issues have to do with some of the very glute focused work I would be doing when I wasn't doing a balanced training program in a lowered caloric deficit. So, all of those things go hand in hand to kind of set you up for not the most fun training sessions. And so like what you said, I just had to embrace being able to accept that I wasn't going to fit in a specific box if I wanted to live a training life and a lifestyle that I wanted to have, for the future of myself, essentially. Not saying that, I'm still a huge lover of bodybuilding. I love the sport. I love all the athletes still. Like I just had to decide what was best for me ultimately.
And has it been hard for you to transition from the physique that you had then to the physique you have now? And I don't say that as a backhanded comment.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, and I've experienced this to some degree, I've never competed, but for example, what I've experienced is once you've been very lean. Now I haven't been stage lean, but I've been pretty lean for photo shoots. Call it 6 or 7%. You know, when you have ab veins, you're pretty lean. And so once you
I'd
get
say so.
once you get pretty lean, anything fatter than that kind of just feels fat. And and so have you had to deal with any of those kinds of issues?
Yeah, for sure. I think anybody who's ever been stage lean, your mind and your psyche is not going to be perfect after that. Like you're going to struggle with that. You know, where a lot of competitors will understand this, and maybe this will be a new concept to your listeners, but when you diet down that lean and your organs are not essentially protected by body fat, that's sometimes where you're actually going to regain body fat the quickest is in your abdomen area. So, and that was always an area,
especially for women.
Oh,
because
yeah,
I mean that there's biological programming.
Yeah.
For the purpose of protecting a baby, right? I mean, so women are going to tend to store more fat around there.
Exactly. And so being genetically disadvantaged in that area to begin with from my history. I'm Native American and Italian. I wasn't raised without carbohydrates as a very big part of my life, or corn for that matter. Like my dietary intake was just pretty much carbs as a child. Like I don't remember a large focus on proteins, but it's neither here nor there. But so yes, that was a huge, hard thing for me to deal with because I would gain, and I have leaner limbs as a former endurance athlete. I think I changed some of my, genetic makeup there. I have leaner limbs, and then I'd be just gaining midsection body fat. And that's also the more dangerous body fat to have as well in terms of your overall biological markers. So yes, I mentally would be wow, unless I'm stage lean, I'm just never going to have veins in my abs. I'm never going to even have visible veins or visible abs for that matter. Yeah. I mean, and they're so fleeting. That physique is so fleeting. It lasts maybe, I was able to hold on to it, quote, not that I was trying to, but I was able to withhold it the longest point after this past season. I just think my body was in a better place. But in previous seasons, that physique was gone in 2 weeks. And even if I was following my reverse diet protocols, and I'm very diligent with that. And, I'd have a couple meals here and there, and that'd be about it after show. Food hasn't been a big, driver of my lack of adherence to my post.
No Dwayne Johnson cheat meals after.
No, that's never, like I said, been up.
I haven't done that in a while either, simply because I find I actually don't really enjoy it. I enjoy eating off plan here and there is fine. But for when I was younger, I used to have kind of blowout meals just for fun, basically. Yeah. But then too many times afterward, I'm lying on the couch in pain, sweating. I'm why did I do this? So now I'm older and wiser.
Digestion's a huge thing for me. And it's always been a challenge for me to get solid and good quality digestion. So it's now over the past, 4 to 5 years, I've really had good digestion. So it's if it's not going to help me in any way and it's going to only make things harder for the next day or two, I'm it's not worth it.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. So what has helped you deal with some of these body image wrinkles that you mentioned, transitioning from being very focused on low body weight, low body fat, to what is now more of a focus on performance? Obviously, you want to look good. We all want to look good. That is at least half of the reason why we still do this stuff. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right?
No, there's nothing wrong with that. I think there should be a level of aesthetic desire within your goals. Otherwise, what's the purpose?
Yeah. Anybody who says anybody who's in the gym, let's call it 3 to 5 days a week at least.
Yeah. You're there to look somewhat good.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. No matter what they say.
Yeah. No matter what you say, you have some desire, whether it be for, overall health or at both combination of aesthetics. But,
yeah. And did your idea though of, what is a good physique or what you like to see in the mirror, has that changed?
A little bit. I mean, I would love to have one day seen, really carved out glutes, because like as a bikini competitor, but just as a lover of bodybuilding in general, that's such like a marker of
the striated glutes. That's
I mean, it's such a good
that's
achievement.
The alpha and omega. That's it.
Yeah, it's it. So, I mean, obviously, like, I've always still wanted to improve that area. Do I hyper focus and change my training so much to the point at which I'm using that area? No. I just, if it grows, it grows. If it doesn't, I'm still happy. But, I at first, and part of the reason why, I think physique competitors have a hard time is because the general population who might see us thinks that we're going to stay that way, that we achieve that and we're going to stay that way. Like I remember going home after my very first competition and my mom was like, so this is where you're going to stay now? Like, this is what you're going to look like? And I'm like, no. And even the way
this
into
is when
like,
you take all of the pictures and then you trickle them out. That's the Instagram trick, which you probably don't do, but some of the people, just for people listening, keep that in mind. When some people, this should be more probably men than women. Yeah, some dudes do stay very big, lean, and strong all year round, and often that involves PEDs. Almost always. I mean, if you just look too good for too long, especially in men, right? But regardless, sometimes what people will do is they'll get in great shape, and then they'll take a lot of pictures over the course of maybe a week or two, different settings, and then they will drip those out over the course of months to give the impression that they always look that way.
Well, and funny you mentioned that, because I learned that lesson the hard way. As I started to get more competitive in competing, obviously the body fat got leaner, the determination to win became more present, and I no longer could have the capacity when it came down to that point to do all these photo shoots. Like mentally, I wasn't there. I mean, who knows what my face would have looked like? I've been like half asleep. Also, I found out as I got older, my face needed body fat to look like more. Yeah. I mean,
that's I think one of the just elements of aging that makes you look more aged, right? In men and women, is that you just lose roundness.
I need some collagen in my face. I need some roundness, some fullness in my cheeks. And otherwise I'm smiling and it's just like, I don't know. I called, so I look like Michael Jackson at some point. Like the concave, I already have really high cheekbones. So like the concave, lower facial structure, I was like, no, these photos are not good. So I knew that I was stressing my body out and I was stressing myself out with the time that I would need to devote to the photo shoots and the energy I would do it. And I remember that my coach at the time saying like, hey, do you want to be a badass physique competitor or do you want to be a fitness model? And I was like, okay, well, I didn't really have success as a fitness model, so I want to be a badass physique competitor. So I learned, he was great at putting me in like the right headspace that I needed to be at for, really what my ultimate goal was. Not to necessarily look really good in hundreds of pictures, but to actually like win at what I wanted to do. So yeah, but I now face a little bit, there are some little trolls within the YouTube and internet space that they're mainstream people. They don't know that physique competitors are not going to stay that way at all times. And the big one on my YouTube channel that I laugh about is somebody goes in there and says, my muscle melted away. And I'm like, no, that's not quite how it works. I just have more body fat over top of my muscle now. Nothing melted away. Like I still know like metabolically what kind of amount of tissue that I do carry. And I think that's
also
pretty
your
cool.
Performance in the gym too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm stronger now than I was then. So usually when you lose muscle, you don't get stronger.
No. but it melts
Yeah,
away.
I get comments like that every now and then. Like if I'll go on an interview sometimes wearing a shirt and then it's all, does this guy even lift? Right. Because I'm not that big. I'm 193, 195, 6'2", lean, pretty lean, not stage lean, of course, but fairly lean. But it's that particularly with guys, you'll get that sometimes where if you are not that big, you'll wear baggy clothes, and then people are like, "So are you still working out?" Or and then if it's a tight shirt, it's you look, you're
jacked.
huge. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's just,
yeah, that's a common thing for sure.
Yeah.
Just I think people who don't understand the sport and don't understand what physique competitors have to go through, to them it just seems so foreign.
I mean, and understandably so. It really is. If you look at it through
such a small part of the population.
Yeah, you look at it through the eyes of your average gym goer.
Yeah, and even in the niche of like fitness now, like I think at first when Instagram came about, it was a kind of playground for physique competitors, but now like we're even a smaller niche within the fitness space of like social media too.
Totally. What are some of the aspects of training that you can, and really anybody listening again who is not brand new, because if you're brand new, if you do things halfway correctly, you're making progress. You're adding weight to the bar every week and you're seeing changes in your body every couple of weeks, and it's a lot of fun. Eventually that slows down. And so what are some of the elements of your training that motivate you and that you pay attention to, as opposed to only maybe paying attention to how your muscles look or how your glutes are developing? And not that you necessarily did that exclusively previously, but I think that talking about that could be valuable because it's relevant in my own training, and I had to move away from measurements and progress pictures because again, so little was changing. It just it wasn't even worth measuring or taking pictures anymore. And so I had to find other things that I could track and care about I'm a very routine oriented person. So I was going to do my training regardless, but if I can take simple measures to make it more enjoyable and to increase, I guess, motivation, I think it's worthwhile.
So one of the things I dove deeper into was, PT work for my hip injury that I was dealing with, and working through, mobility work and proper technique for, specific lifts that I was having issues with. So I kind of have dove deeper into like filming myself training, which I always have done in the past, but like now I film myself and I'm not necessarily filming for YouTube or filming for Instagram. I'm filming so I can see my motor pattern. I can see my alignment. I can see, the time at which I'm spending in the eccentric and concentric portions of the movement. I actually I feel like I'm like you said, like I have the time and the mental energy to devote to like the small nuances of training now a little bit more for myself. And it also helps with obviously myself as a coach with clients. Like I can break down and look at a movement better because I've started to learn more and more about that. But I also I pick the big lifts. Like I want to get stronger in my squat again after dealing with this hip injury. I want to get better at, hip thrusts. I want to, increase the load there. So there's still a couple of movements that are on, my to-do goals, but I still focus on maybe being more of this overall focus athlete and doing a lot more unilateral things. I used to avoid a little bit of unilateral things because typically the time that it took, because it adds up on your training. But now when I don't feel like I'm at a crunch, it's like, okay, well, I'll add a unilateral and I'll take out one extra movement. That's fine for me at this point in my life and in my training. If that's going to help me feel better tomorrow and it's going to be more beneficial for me in the long run to add more unilateral, I'm going to do it.
What are some of your favorite unilateral exercises?
Single leg press for sure.
I don't know. I probably have done that. but it's been a while. I haven't been, the gym I used to go to in Virginia, it had a leg press that you could decouple. The platform was two halves. Yeah, exactly. And you could connect them, or you could disconnect them.
The coupling ones are the best, but you can get a little tricky with, where your feet placement is on the non-coupled ones.
Why do you like that so much?
My PT put me on it and made me do it. He was like, I want you to press as hard as you can with each leg and see what loads we can get till like fatigue at that point. And that's how we were able to see the large discrepancy in my ability to push in my hip drive. It was like kind of a light bulb moment. I was like, oh, that's a huge difference. When it came down to also the endurance that I was able to withstand too, like my left legs gives out so fast. And it wasn't really brought to my attention until the PT took me into a gym setting. I wasn't just in his office. We did a couple techniques in his office, and then he was like, let's get on the floor. Let's see how this actually works. I love split squats, hate them, absolutely hate them.
Hard actually.
Curtsy split squats. Those are great. Hate them as well. Almost everything unilateral I hate. Dumbbell step ups. I think alternating step ups, I'm the most clumsy individual doing, but alternating step ups are great. I just lose count and I, trip up myself and I'm like, oh, did I go up with that foot or not that foot? Yeah. So that's a tough one. But most of the unilateral stuff I do is more for lower body.
Yeah, makes sense. In terms of tracking your training, have you like something that I'll just throw out there, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on something that it's a little thing, and I've mentioned it on social media. I made a note actually that I really should explicitly address this if I update my book for intermediate and advanced weightlifters called Beyond Bigger, Leaner, Stronger. It's obviously written more to men, and I do plan on doing a female version of that. But that is to start tracking my reps in reserve, or for people listening, the number of good reps that I have left in the end of a set. Now, I've talked about knowing that when you're training, and okay, if you're doing a compound exercise, something between probably around 2 good reps left is a good place to end most sets. Like, don't push yourself to 0 good reps left on every set of squats. It's just not necessary. And on accessory exercises, it's more appropriate to go closer to failure. If you're doing biceps curls, sure, go closer to failure. You have to go to failure, maybe 0 or maybe 1 good rep left. But what I started to do recently is track that. So I use a Google Sheet for planning and tracking my training, and have a column for that. And so why I like that is that's where I first start to see progress in a training block. And because progress is quite slow at this point, it's nice to see though that, okay, so I had, I was doing benching today, sets of 6 with maybe 195 or something. And it's nice to see that, I had 2 to 3 good reps left all the way through all 4 sets, even on the 4th. But the last time I did that, my 4th set was like a 0 to 1 good reps left. So that is a little bit of progress that you repeat that. And eventually that turns into sets of 6 with 200 with 2 or 3 good reps left. And so there have been other aspects of programming, paying attention to the details of programming that have, again, made my training just more interesting. And that has helped. Are there any similar types of things that you've experienced in how you're training now versus how you were previously?
Absolutely. I mean, for example, I'm probably not going to get my shoulder press PR much higher than it is. Just mechanically, my weight, the way my body is set up. Like, same. I don't think I'll put, the 60s over top of my head without a spot, ever in my life. Yeah. And not to say that there's something wrong with that in my progression and training, it's just not going to really happen. And so, like you said, it's a RPE, rate of perceived exertion per set, or it's an RIR situation. And people forget that there are PRs within the RIR setting.
Yep.
And in fact, to bring the conversation, a little back into like how a woman could focus on her training. I talk a lot about RIR with my female clients who are in a, hormonal dysfunction setting, and we have to leave reps in the reserve. We can't train to failure in those types of settings. And so that is actually 100% an appropriate gauge for how you are progressing without overstimulating or overstraining your central nervous system as well. So a lot of people kind of forget that your RIR is almost a way to protect that, nervous system overload. So you can actually recover really well if you're not tapping into that overload all the time.
Especially with the bigger exercises,
Yeah.
where you're using heavy weight and it's involving a large amount of muscle mass. There is a big difference in terms of stress in the body between a set of squats, call it 6 reps, 8 reps, whatever, and a 0 good reps left. Meaning, for people listening, think of like your last rep is a grinder. You probably almost didn't get it. That's a 0 good reps left. And a 2 good reps left, where the last rep is difficult. But if you were to video it, you probably would see that the bar didn't slow down much, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, it was more of a mental slowdown.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit maybe in the sticking point, but it looked probably pretty smooth on camera. And that's a lesson that I've had to learn as I've gotten older and just trained more. It's taken a little bit of discipline to end a lot of the hard sets on the bigger exercises with 2-ish. I'm okay again. If I have 1 left on my final set, I'm okay with that on a squat or a bench press or even a deadlift. But if set 1 is a 1 to 2 good reps left, then I'm taking weight off the bar. Whereas previously I'd push for another. Okay, that's probably now a solid 1. And then now in the 3rd set, that's like a 0 to 1. And then the 4th would be a true 0. And that plus more frequent deloading has helped me a lot. It has prevented, I haven't had any major acute injuries. I hurt my SI joint one time years ago, but what I would get though are the occasional RSIs, which can still happen, but I've noticed fewer repetitive stress injuries, less sickness, which I can't say is because of that, but I can say previously when I was training just inappropriately intensely, so to speak, or doing too much and not deloading often enough. Often a deload would come because of some sort of trip. It could be a work or a vacation where I'm just not going to be able to do my normal thing. All right, fine. Or some sort of illness. And it was maybe a couple illnesses a year, maybe 2 on average. And it wasn't anything severe, but that's why I would have to take a week off the gym because I'd have a cold or whatever. And now, I've had COVID a couple of times, but it was like mild congestion. So I wouldn't even really have known unless I got tested. And there were reasons in both instances where I got tested. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother getting tested because I could care less, really. But those are the only illnesses to speak of in a couple of years now. And there probably are other factors that have contributed to that. But I do think managing my training stress better has helped a lot with that.
Yeah, I think training stress is something, I don't think a lot of people necessarily take into consideration until it's too late.
Yeah. And it's tricky because you can work your ass off in a workout and then feel pretty good an hour or 2 later. And you may not realize, though, the demands you've now placed on your body to recover from that. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I had to pay very, very close attention to was my recovery, just because of where I had pushed my body to in the past. In order to sustain the contest prep and the body fat levels that I did have, I had to really protect my training volume a lot over the years. So it was almost this kind of double-edged sword. It's like, in order to keep going, I had to scale back my training, but scaling back my training probably did inhibit my growth in certain areas that may have needed to be more competitive. But overall, I was able to, accomplish a goal. I was still able to, essentially still train. I never found myself not being able to train on a consistent basis. But I have embraced deloading. I force my clients to deload. I'm like, hey, I hear your feedback here, and like, we're not technically on track to deload, but I'm deloading you this week. Like there's just, when you start to hear and know that your sleep is getting disturbed, your digestion is off, you're, having little sniffles here and there, like as soon as you overtax your central nervous system, you're going to be immunocompromised. And, people forget that, yes, like most people in the gym are healthy, but the gym is a very pretty dirty place.
Many gyms. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we're all very healthy individuals that are there most of the time, taking care of ourselves, first and foremost, but, there are some germs there. And so I always tell my clients, like, if you're not feeling 100%, like, don't necessarily feel like you got to go right to the gym. Like you can go for a walk outside. You can, let's check what a walk would feel like first before going into lifting. And, when one of them has like a long vacation and they've had a long flight, typically the first thing I want to do, I got to go in and hit legs because I'm going to sweat. I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to feel like I actually like lost a little bit of what I gained on vacation. And I'm like, no. We do not go from vacation right into the highest central nervous system taxing workout on your worksheet. Like that's not what we're doing here. I'm like, let's start off with Delton arms. And they're like, oh, really? Delton arm day? And I'm like, yep. Let's just go in and do a little cardio and move your upper body. Let's let the legs like cool out for a little bit. You just like walked on your vacation 22,000 steps as a tourist. So let's let those legs rest for a minute.
If you like what I'm doing here on the podcast and elsewhere, definitely check out my health and fitness books, including the #1 best-selling weightlifting books for men and women in the world, Bigger, Leaner, Stronger, and Thinner, Leaner, Stronger, as well as the leading flexible dieting cookbook, The Shredded Chef. In your training, are you now doing things that you wouldn't have done previously because you enjoy them, but they didn't quite fit in with the more rigid goals that you were pursuing previously? So now basically, are you able to have more fun in your training, even if it's not maybe scientifically optimal in certain ways? You know what I mean? Where you're like, I'm just going to do this because I like it and I can afford that luxury now because I'm already at the end game.
Yeah. I remember distinctively doing a workout while I was in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. It was nothing but supersets back to back. It was total body. It was total body. Yeah. It was total body. And, my husband was ready.
Vacation workout. Exactly.
Vacation workout. Yeah. He was with me and, I didn't have any like hard set goals or anything. I just was like, I want to move today. So I just, put together a superset of a back and chest movement. And then I did leg extension and leg curls because they had the machines. And I was like, well, I'm just going to literally use everything that they have that's a machine-based movement. And I'm just going to figure out a superset and I'm going to superset everything today. And honestly, I had a lot of fun and like we had a lot of fun doing it. So, absolutely those days happen. I feel like I can quote play in the gym a little bit more if I'm visiting a new gym. I don't stick hard and fast to my logbook, if that makes sense. If there's a gym that has a cool machine that I've never done before, I'm going to get on and try it. Whereas before I'd be like, it's not in my program. I might do a set on it or something just to see what it's like, but I wouldn't add it or do a full 4 or 5 sets on it. So I definitely have that. I definitely incorporate a lot more like quote, what they would call like functional movement, like a lot more of a rotational type things, like a rotational landmine press or, a wall ball slam, like a rotational wall ball slam, like physique athletes don't do that kind of stuff. I mean, let's be honest. Yeah. But if I close out my workout and I rarely do I get to do this, but I look down at my watch and I'm like, I got a little bit of time. I'm going to do like some weird shit at the end with wall ball. Cause I'm in a CrossFit style gym that's got like a really great open space. They have a turf, they've got a sled, like there's just a lot of things to play with. And so I actually just randomly started adding in, this is a viable physique movement, but the pendulum squat, but I've never been at a gym that had the pendulum squat.
Yeah. My gym has that as well. And that was the first time I'd ever seen it, actually. I was like, that's cool.
I mean, I've seen it on, Instagram, and I've seen it in a couple gyms I've been traveling to.
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen it in person where I'm like, oh shit, my gym. I'm going to use it in my next training block.
Yeah. So I wrote out a training program for myself, and I included the pendulum squat in it and I did it for a full 8 weeks. And I was like, all right, I'm done with that for a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I also don't feel like I have to keep something in there if it's just like something I'm not necessarily looking forward to anymore. I obviously I tell my clients, like, if you're avoiding it, let's figure out why you're avoiding it. Is it something within the physique? Is it something that you're lacking? So, this is one of those moments where, like, maybe don't practice as I preach if you're a client who listens to this, or anybody who's a prospective client, because you shouldn't avoid lunges just because you hate them. But like, I'm going to pick and choose. I'm going to cherry pick a little bit at this point in my life. I'm 36 years old. I've been lifting since, I was 22. I'm going to cherry pick a little bit.
And I think it's appropriate to do that, even if somebody is brand new, so long as they understand that certain exercises are more effective than others. And if they hate too many exercises, then that's a problem. If they're like, okay, we're going to train your lower body. And then they say, well, I hate every form of squat. I hate the leg press. Basically, all I like is I like the leg. Yeah. I'll do kickbacks and I'll do a hamstring curl and a leg extension, and that's it. Okay, we could start there, but just this is going to be slow going. We could do a lot better if you learn to not hate some of these things. But that, I'm sure for a lot of people listening, that's not the case. And the exercises, I mean, I don't know if I would say I hate any exercises. Some exercises are just not comfortable for me. Just they don't work well with my body, and so that's why I don't like doing them. And so, of course, that's a good reason to not do them. But maybe if again somebody is, I would say, new or experienced, and there's an exercise that they're just ambivalent about it. It's okay. Maybe there's something they don't like about it, and on the other hand, it's okay. And then there's another exercise that's a viable alternative that they do like. I think it's totally appropriate to choose the exercise that you like. And again, it's just coming back to this theme of when you're not making enough progress anymore to make you excited to go to the gym every day. And it happens to everybody. Eventually that happens. You have to find other ways to get excited. And again, in my experience, it's been a matter of a lot of these little things cumulatively adding up to training that is just more fun to do than if I didn't bother with any of them and I didn't really think about it, and I just kind of robotically went through the motions. And in the end, I would say the results are going to be better too with the more personalized approach, because the more we're enjoying our training, the more we're going to exert ourselves. I mean, the performance is just going to be better, right? And so, there are, and this is something that I thought of when you were mentioning shoulder presses. Another element of it can feel like progression, or at least it can feel there's a novelty to it, is changing different exercises. So on my overhead pressing, the strongest I've ever been, I remember I did 225 seated. This was seated. I don't remember, my strongest standing overhead was maybe 195 or so, but 225 for 2 seated. And I don't think I weighed 10 to 12 pounds more. That was like 10 years ago. My 1RM is probably, I have to look on my spreadsheet. I would guess 195 to 205 right now. So it's never, I may be able to get back to that, but I'm never going to exceed that by much. And the same thing applies to, again, standing press, dumbbell presses, but something that I've found useful is to alternate between those, because maybe when I haven't done a standing overhead press, and depending on how I'm programming it, it might be 4 months. It may even be longer. Like if I'm doing Arnold presses right now, for minimally, I'll do it for 2 months. I may do it for 4, and then switch back to another variation. It's a little bit fun to do an exercise that I hadn't done in a while. And to groove the form back in. And I think there are also other benefits, like, for example, avoiding repetitive stress injuries by not doing the exact same type of squat or press or deadlift for like 8 months on end, with heavy weight. But is that something that you also do in your training, is just intentionally make sure you're including variety, just because variety is spice of life is the cliche, right?
So, I think this brings up a very, very valid point to training is changing the plane of motion sometimes is a completely, viable way to change the movement, change the exercise, change your tissue, your small ligaments and joints, and improve the health of your joint by, changing that plane of motion. So like you said, a shoulder press, you have both the seated, you have the standing, you have an anterior, you have a single arm shoulder press, whether that be seated and standing, you have the Arnold press. And I think people forget about like the planes of motion within the body and how there's so many viable movements on so many various different planes of motion. And like you said, if you're not doing a complementary option of that, you could also be finding yourself completely stagnant. People always ask me, like, one of the biggest questions I answer on Instagram is, why do you do a barbell glute bridge from the floor? Is it better than a barbell hip thrust? And I'm like, absolutely not. One exercise is not superior over the other. I've just been hip thrusting for 8 weeks and I need to let my hip bones heal. Like they hurt at this point. So I need something different in order for me to be able to progress in a couple weeks on the hip thrust again. I need to change that modality. And people forget that you get a different eccentric and concentric portion of the movement when you change the plane of motion. And so understanding, training and human anatomy training, combining those two makes for training program design like so much more fun when you realize there's really all these exercises you can do. You're really not very limited. You have so much spice that you can add to your life in the gym,
including machines.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people will stay away from machines because they'll hear, and not that this is wrong, but they'll hear that generally speaking, free weights are more effective than machines, but then they'll take that to mean, oh, well, I guess I should only do free weight exercises and not use machines.
Yeah. I mean, if I see a client or if I myself am finding that I can't progress, like I'm just at a standstill, I'm going to say, is there a plate loaded or pin loaded machine available to you of this movement that we can somewhat do, or even somewhat similar to this movement? Because if I can get them in a very structured and safe, safer than a free weight machine, they're more stable. We're going to be able to, like you said, push to lesser RIR. Yeah. We're going to be able to increase that, rate of perceived exertion to where it's high enough to where they can then feel more confident trying to pick up a bigger load in the shoulder press. Okay, do we have a pin loaded shoulder press? Let's see how far we can progress in a pin loaded shoulder press over a couple weeks instead.
I'm doing cable side raises for the first time in a long time.
Those are terrible.
I forgot how hard they are.
They're terrible.
It's humbling. I'm at 15 pounds for 8. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. I mean, that one is also so neurologically advantageous. Like you have to keep doing it in order to even remotely progress. And I tell this with women a lot of times, like, they're like, I can't go up 5 pounds. And I'm like, well, yeah, anatomically, like you have smaller surface area of muscle tissue. It's going to take a lot longer for you to gain 5 pounds in a shoulder movement. Yep. So the way that machines are designed, we're just not going to hit those next tiers for a long period of time.
Correct. Especially with those smaller muscle groups where.
Yeah, you're just not.
I
think I've been at the same bicep curl for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Mine's been in the same range. You know what I mean? It's been, right now.
On a good day, I can get the 25s. On a bad day, it's going to be 20s. And I'm like, why is it 20s today? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It's like some days you're in the cosmic strike zone and some days you're not. And, if you strike out, you strike out. And on the side raise, if the stack doesn't have 2.5 pounds, it's what I'm thinking is normally. So in my training, I'm progressing from 10 to 12 sets of 10 to 12 on isolation accessory exercises to 6 to 8 or even 4 to 6 on those same exercises at the end of the training block. And my primary exercises are programmed a little bit differently. It's a linear percentage of 1 rep max, goes from 10s to like 2s and AMRAPs. And so, I'm thinking what I'll probably do is, because the only way to progress with the stack is in 5-pound increments. So I was in 10 to 12 with 10 pounds, and I got my 4 sets of 12, which is my cue for adding weight. But then I go to 15, and now I only can do 8. All right, fine. Well, whatever. I'm just going to roll with it, and I'm just going to do 8s now. And otherwise, I suppose I could try to push for more reps with the 10 pounds or add a set, but ultimately, I don't think it'll matter one way or another. But for people listening, the reason I say that is if you're familiar with that exercise, you've probably run into this problem, and you've probably run into this problem with any sort of shoulder raise, whether it's dumbbell and then rear raises as well. They're just very hard to progress on.
Yeah, and then you can't. I was going to say you can add drop sets, but you're only up to 15 pounds, so you can't.
It's true. Yeah. Or I guess I could do rest pause and, whatever. Yeah. I'm just going to keep it simple. And I'll go, now I'm in probably the 6 to 8 range, and I'll stay there. And if I can get 4 sets of 8, with at least maybe 1 or 2 good reps in reserve on the final set, which is also something that I should just mention a little tip that has helped me, and particularly, again, this is going to be very useful to an intermediate and advanced weightlifter, is I don't progress unless I hit my, so with my accessory, with my secondary, it's double progression, pretty straightforward. Currently I'm going for 4 sets at the top of my rep range, but I'm also thinking with reps in reserve. Whereas previously, if my final set was a 0 RIR, if I hit my progression target, I would progress. But what I found is that usually would be, or that sometimes, especially as I got stronger, and especially with the bigger exercises, that would be a 1 step forward and then a 2 step backward type of scenario, because, okay, I hit my progression target, but I had to work really hard to do it. I added weight, and then I couldn't stay within my rep range for the subsequent sets. Whereas now what I'm doing is, again, like on an accessory exercise, I want to get 4 sets at the top of my rep range, and I want to make sure that I have at least 1 good rep left in that final set. If the final set was a 0, I'll probably stick with that 1 more round, and the next time I may be able to make it at a 1. And that has been particularly helpful, though, again, with the bigger exercises, where you have more leeway with the accessory exercises, but with the squat. So, for example, if I'm supposed to do sets of 4 with 85% of my estimated 1 rep max, if my final set is a 0, but I got 4, I'm gonna take some weight off of the bar. Whereas previously, I wouldn't do that. I'd be like, whatever, I got my reps, good enough.
Yeah, one of so this could be a debate question. I'm going to ask you, what do you think about movement of your exercise patterns when you find a sticking point? So would you ever move, an accessory movement to the top of your workout if you find that you're sticking in it, because you don't want to have it be pre-fatigued from it being a secondary mover? So that's my question for you.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It just, I guess, depends on how much you care, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but it's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah. That's something that I would say is not maybe quote unquote optimized about my training in that regard. However, my primary focus, and what I enjoy also, is I like to see progress in the big exercises, because that's where I still have some progress left. Not so much in muscularity, but in strength, because I'm working back toward our previous PRs in terms of absolute numbers. But I've hit a couple relative strength PRs, and I'm close to where I was previously, because I'm like 10 pounds lighter now. And 10 pounds in body weight, this, but a lot of people listening, it makes quite a big difference when you go. If I were to go from where I'm at right now, 193 or whatever, just the sheer amount of food that I would be able to eat every day, probably be 4,000 calories a day, that would allow me to slowly regain weight and get back up to that 10 pounds, that's going to have a big effect in the gym, as well as just the added body weight and the added lean tissue. And so that's fun to me, seeing that, in my last macro cycle, I'd have to pull up my spreadsheet, but so I did the safety bar squat for the first time ever. So
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. I'd never worked out in a gym with a safety bar, and I was like, I'm going to try that. And so there was a bit of learning the exercise. And so my progress was probably at least half of the poundage that I gained in 1RM, was simply learning the exercise. But in 4 months, I know that where I ended my AMRAP, and then I estimated 1 rep max, was like 320 on it. And I want to say, I'd have to pull up my spreadsheet, but I want to say I started like 270. So that's kind of fun. Right. But now, okay, I'm more familiar with the exercise. I can't expect results like that again. However, if I can gain 10 pounds on a lift in 4 months, that's fun to me. So my training again is more focused on, all right, I'm going to do the biggest and the hardest stuff first. And then I do view the accessory work as, I do try to progress, and I don't just phone it in and like walk through the rest of my workout. But I do understand that after I've done 4 sets of heavy deadlifts, close-ish to failure, 2-ish good reps left, still pretty hard. My horizontal pull that comes next, and then finally maybe I do some biceps at the end. Yeah, those are compromised, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whereas if I were to do what you're suggesting, yes, that would make a lot of sense for maybe trying to break through a sticking point on those accessory exercises. But then when I got to my deadlifts, my performance is going to be compromised. So that's how I've approached it. Is again, what are you trying to achieve, and what do you enjoy?
Yeah. So normally the one that I move around, I guess most frequently is a lunge variation or a split squat variation, because I find them challenging for myself. Balance, once fatigue sets in, balance for those 2 movements is skewed a lot. So for myself, for my clients, when we're kind of hitting kind of a standstill, or they're complaining about doing a split squat or a dumbbell walking lunge or something like that, I will migrate it up to the top. And, some people would probably disagree with me doing that. Like I would make people split squat or lunge sometimes before a big lift. And they're like, every time I'm like, not going to, like you said, and it's not going to be my best deadlift or my best squat day. That's not the point of that particular program design. So inherently understanding the purpose of why you're in the gym, or what you're trying to accomplish within a particular cycle is so important. But I do toggle with those like unilateral movements, and kind of sometimes bumping them above the more functional or foundational squats and deadlifts, because I find that I can eventually progress in my squat more if I also improve in this unilateral way too. And you don't improve when it is at the bottom nearly as much. So so that's my argument there. But a lot of people would think I'm kind of maybe weird for doing that. And I do get some pushback, especially if I have a strength client coming to me for more physique type work, or they're trying to kind of come maybe not be so dependent on strength progression and be more physique tailored. I kind of flip the script on them, and they're like, wait, I've never done it this way.
Another argument for doing that could be, and you'd mentioned this just regarding, so take the split squat and the balance component of it. If you're always doing, which I agree, the more fatigued your lower body is, the harder it is, especially when you're trying to use heavy-ish weights. If you're doing anything 10 reps or fewer on the split squat, it's heavy-ish, or maybe very heavy if you're trying to do like 4s. And if you're fatigued, you're going to have a harder time with the balance. And so if you're always doing that later in your workout, you really only know how to do that exercise poorly. Like if we're talking about,
that's a good point.
The movement patterns, and that can get in the way of progression. Anybody who's done a lot of split squats knows that when you're kind of wobbling around, you're wasting energy. Like you're not going to get very far doing it that way. So by moving it earlier in the workout, or even to your first exercise when you're freshest, you are going to do your let's just say your technically best split squats with it earlier in the workout. And doing that for, it probably would be appropriate to do it for at least 3 or 4 weeks if you wanted to hone your technique. That can make a lot of sense, in hopes of then, let's say you now move it back to later in your workout, but you put in that work. Yeah. Hopefully you've retained. And of course, this happens on a neurological level. You're not going to be particularly aware of it, but hopefully now with the muscle memory that you've gained by doing all these reps well, it'll carry over to later in your workout. I think that would make sense. Yep. Awesome. Well, I'm sure we could keep going, pinball around, talk about all kinds of things, but in the spirit of, I usually try to go not too much longer than an hour. People are like, "Oh, it's too long," but I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And let's finish up with where people can find you and find your work, and if there's anything in particular that you want them to know about, anything maybe relevant to some of the stuff we've been talking about, let's let them know.
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Chanel Collette, and through YouTube at Chanel Collette. YouTube is a little bit of a lower hanging fruit right now, just for the sake of building my coaching business, and I expanded my team this year. So if you are looking and interested in coaching, you can check us out at audaciousathletes.com. It's myself and 4 other women. They're just like the backbone to essentially me wanting to continue to do what we're doing. Like having a team, I didn't really realize how much that would fuel just my desire to continue to do what I do, and mentorship through them as well. So I absolutely that's my team's my bread and butter. Yeah, it makes it more fun for sure. It's not just me. I'm not just a one-woman show anymore, which is so great. But yeah, so that's where people can find me at. We offer both nutrition programming and training programming. So we, do offer clients who don't necessarily want to be in tracking all the time. I mean, I have countless of clients who don't necessarily want to spend their life determining what goes in their mouth by what an app tells them to do or what I tell them to do. So I think there's not enough coaches out there who just offer
a food scale. We can start there. Yeah. And they don't want to buy one.
Yeah. Or, I just talked to somebody today. She's like, I don't own a weight scale. So, that's a viable person who could really want just sound training programming. And so that is something that we do offer. And with, that we do cardio programming, because your cardio should be supportive of your training goals too. They're both go hand in hand. So we offer all 3 components with us. So I also offer training programs on my website at chanelcollette.com, some 4, 6, 8 week programs, an at-home training program as well. And those are all viable, progressive, overload-based programs.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks again for taking the time to do this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Nice to finally do this after many years of being with Legion. It's been great.
I know. It's, I'll say that's my fault. I should have made it happen sooner, but.
Oh no, you're cool. I like being the OG. I think I'm one of the OGs.
That's true. That's very true. Well, I hope you liked this episode. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, subscribe to the show, because it makes sure that you don't miss new episodes. And it also helps me because it increases the rankings of the show a little bit, which of course then makes it a little bit more easily found by other people who may like it just as much as you. And if you didn't like something about this episode or about the show in general, or if you have ideas or suggestions or just feedback to share, shoot me an email, mike@muscleforlife.com, muscleforlife.com, and let me know what I could do better, or just what your thoughts are about maybe what you'd like to see me do in the future. I read everything myself. I'm always looking for new ideas and constructive feedback. So thanks again for listening to this episode, and I hope to hear from you soon.